Hey beautiful, I wanted to talk to you just a little bit more about organizing your important papers. So these are those papers that if you did not have them, they would be absolutely terrible to not have. They would cause so many problems, bad things could happen in an emergency. These are the ones that you look for. They're really hard to replace. We're talking about those kinds of papers. And these are the papers that stress us out the most about our entire paper system, aren't they? I mean, it's kind of why we have a paper system to begin with, is to make sure that we can get our hands on insurance policies and birth certificates and mortgage statements and things that are really important for our lives. So getting those organized is probably the most important part out of the entire paper system. Now, when you're doing the challenge, we focus on the active papers to start with our action file. Then we have a workshop that focuses on our archive papers in our file cabinet. And then that last piece of making sure that you have all of your important papers at your fingertips, super safe and easy to reach, would be our binder. Now, whether you make your own binder or we have the Spark Life binder that you can buy, it doesn't matter. Just make sure to use something to keep all of these important documents at the tip of your fingers. And I've just found with clients over the years, I've been building the Life binder with clients for probably about 12 years now. Well, I have found that having a binder of all of this information is definitely the easiest and best way to manage all of this. So I want to walk you through the Spark Life binder. And you can either build your own or create your own version of organizing based on this, or I have in the description, I've got a link to buy your own Spark Life binder. It's just a download, and then you can use your own binder and dividers and make it your own. You just download it and you can fill it in. It's a PDF, so you can type in your answers on there and keep it digital. You can print it up and put it in a binder, or you can do kind of a hybrid like I do, and I'll tell you about that too. But whatever way you want to do it, I'm going to walk you through some of the categories to think about as you are going through your important papers. So this is my demonstration copy of my Life binder. I have one of this for my household, which is my husband and my stepdaughter. And I have given one to pretty much all of our family members, so that way they have Life binders too. And I've set this system up with clients over the past 12 years repeatedly. And it's great, some of the stories that I hear back about having a binder with all of your information, how important it has been and how useful it's been. So let's walk through what putting together an important papers binder or a Spark Life binder would be like. Inside the binder, one of the first things, if you get the download that you'll find, is you're going to find creating an emergency folder. We'll talk about this one last, but that first chunk, if you download the Spark Life binder, is the emergency folder portion, and this is probably the most vital for the quick grab stuff. And then the second part of the system would be your full binder. So this is a binder where you would grab it in case of an emergency. If you had to evacuate, if there was a problem and you needed to look something up, you could grab your binder to find the information, but it's probably not going to go to the hospital with you or something like that unless you had a whole lot of papers in here that were not in your emergency binder. This should have all of the important information for your life and everybody in the household that you want to include in the binder. When you first open it up, you can see there's the table of contents. Now within this table of contents, I have it broken down into 7 different sections. I found that these have been the most useful. I've refined this over the past 12 years and added to it. And I just released this for a sale recently within the past year as a public sale, because I thought I didn't really want to keep this just for my clients anymore because so many people could use it. But there are 7 sections plus the emergency folder section. So when you're looking at creating your binder, you might want to mimic some of these sections for yourself. Also, within the Spark Life binder, I have a checklist of all of the documents that you want to make sure that you have whether it's in your file system, in your binder, in your life, you want to make sure that you go down this checklist, and there are some things like living will or some end of life documents, things that you might not have thought of that are really helpful to have in place. So if you don't have some of these documents, you can just mark on a checklist what you don't have, and you can create your own list, but mark down what you don't have that you should probably research, get in place, whether you talk to a lawyer, get some legal documents online, whatever it is. You can also mark off any that you do have that you have entered into your binder. And you can also mark off the ones that you do have that you either need to update or find in order to enter in the binder. And this does not need to be a huge project all at once. What I usually tell people to do is to download the binder and put it together. You just hole punch it and stick it in a binder with some dividers. And then as you come across this information, start entering it. You don't necessarily need to go from front to back and fill it all in. You don't necessarily need to fill all of it in at once or make a huge day of it. What I usually do is whatever we can get our hands on with a client, we'll enter that. And then as they go along, and especially right now, if you're sorting papers for a challenge, then as you're going along sorting things, as you find things, you can just enter them really quickly in your binder. And I usually just handwrite the information, and then every once in a while I'll go back into the printable PDF and I'll type it in and reprint a nicer copy when it starts to get too messy looking. But there's no need to necessarily even open up that PDF every single time there's a change if you don't want to. That's up to you. But this checklist will help make sure that you have all the information and see what you're missing. So create your own checklist as you think of things. If you're not using the Spark Life Binder, create your own. As you think of things that you might need that you don't have already, write it down. As you come across things or realize that you need to update something, write it down and just keep that list. So that way you can reference, and then it's so nice to see as that list gets checked off. It's just peace of mind. You know that everything's in place in case anything were to happen. So section 1 in the Spark Life Binder is the basic information. Now, some of this is actually duplicated in the emergency binder because we want a quick grab version, but our basic information, I usually do one tab for each person in the household that I want to track. If you have a college student or something, you might want to include them as well. It's up to you, whoever you want to track. But it would include their basic contact information, copies of their IDs, copies of any important vital documents, any emergency contacts that you have, what their blood type is, any allergies that you might want to track, all the super important, very basic information about that person. Like I said, in the emergency binder, we do track it as well. So it's nice to have that printable version where you can just reprint it for the emergency binder, but you can add different things. They're a little bit of a different function. So do one of these for each person. The reason I say that you want to put copies of the birth certificates and the IDs and things like that is because if you're not keeping this in a safe deposit box or a fireproof safe or something like that, I would hate for something to happen and you lose the originals because the binder was, not in a safe place and was destroyed for some reason, fire or water or whatever, or you lost it in the house or something, although I've yet to have anybody do that. So we just want the copies in the Life Binder so that they're easy to access, but put the originals in that fireproof safe or in that safe deposit box, or keep them with the advisor in a safe place. So that way they're really protected and you don't have to worry about them. You can, within the binder, if you want to, I don't do it with my personal binder too much. I do it with only a few things. But if you want to, you can just put those copies right behind these fillable pages. If you don't want to do the copies and put them in the binder, that's okay. You can also just in the binder, I do this on a number of things, just write where the document is stored in the file drawer. So for example, if it's an organ donor card, you can write this is in the fireproof safe. And then you don't have to have the copy of it in the binder if you don't want to. And then within here, I usually, with the Spark Life Binder, we have all of these fields that you just sort of fill in. So you just go down the list and fill it in. It's kind of brainless. You don't have to think about what you might need. But if you're building this yourself, make sure to organize it in chunks and categories like identification numbers and the basic name and address, letters of instruction, healthcare surrogate information, any kind of power of attorney, important legal documents that would be part of that basic information. So that is the first section. And then after that first chunk, I would have, if there's more than one person, I would have a tab and then do the next person, and a tab and do the next person. Then you have a divider. I like to do the ones with the little pockets in them, because that way if I want to add something to the section really quick, but I don't have time, I could tuck it in the pocket, and then later when I want to type something in on the PDF and reprint it, or photocopy it, or hole punch it, I can do it then. I don't have to do it immediately. So having pockets, super helpful. Section 2 in the Spark Life binder is medical. So the medical section, the things that you would want to gather for your own binder's medical section would include who are the current healthcare providers. And again, this section is one that I put tabs per person. So each person will have their own medical section within this portion. But who are your medical providers? What medical history is important? You know, what surgery dates? Do they have a pacemaker? Do they have diabetes? Are there any specific things that have happened along the way that are significant? And where are the documents kept? So is there a folder in your main file system with all of their blood work results and test results and things like that? It's great for you to be able to see where things are stored if they're not in the binder as well. Also, you might want to include information about health insurance, any medical directives that you might have, if you have a DNR on file, where the DNR is. Usually, if you do have a DNR, I put that in the emergency binder, as well as having it on file with all the hospitals. So that type of thing is going to go in your medical section. And as you can see, it asks you the question, you just answer the questions along the way. And then also in each section you'll find with us, we put a blank page for notes. That way if there's anything that's different for you that might not be covered in the main section, then you can just write notes about it on that note page. So you don't have to worry about if there's a field that's super specific to you that might not have been covered. I've tried over the past 12 years to add everything that I can think of. But if there's something missing, then you've got a space for it. And then again, there's that pocket divider. One of the things I also do with a medical, in the back of my binder, I have these business card holders. So they're sheet protectors that hold business cards. You just slide them in. So if you wanted to in your medical section, you can just reference the doctor's name and then say, you know, card in the back or something like that, and slide their business card in so you don't have to continually rewrite fax numbers and web addresses and all of that stuff. That way you've got it in your binder, but it's a lot faster to do, which I like. Section 3, we talk about end of life arrangements. This is really super helpful for not only you to figure out with your spouse or whatever what you want, but this section is really honestly for your family, because knowing what somebody cared about as far as their end of life and how things are handled at their end of life can be such a relief. It's amazing. I had a client who we set up a life binder. She actually did it towards the end of her life because she knew that she was going to pass soon. And she did not want her family to have to figure all of these things out, and she wanted to make it as easy as possible for her. So we did a whole life binder for them, for her to give to them when she passed. And this section of the end of life arrangements was so helpful for her. For one, she could just go down the list and not forget to tell them anything that would help them out. Things like if she had prepaid funeral arrangements already and where those documents are and who it's with. If she had a charity that she wanted donations to in lieu of flowers, what types of things to write in the obituary, what songs she would like played at the funeral. Do you want to be cremated or buried? Those types of things are great to already have filled out. So I got the most lovely email from her daughter after things settled down a little bit about the fact that this life binder, during a time that was so sad for them and they were going through so much grief, and when you're grieving, your memory is just not that great. It's really hard to focus on working through some of these tasks. So having this made it so easy for them to just kind of go down the list and make sure that all the bases were covered. They knew who to call to let them know that she'd passed, who the important people were to her, and their contact information. It just made it so much easier in a time that was already so hard, that I got this absolutely wonderful email from her daughter about just how much it was a relief and gave her peace of mind that she was doing things that her mom really wanted, and she felt confident in their choices. So this section is really important to put together, not for you, but for your family, because it makes such a huge difference for their peace of mind. So don't forget the end of life arrangements, even though it can sometimes be a scary section to do. Section 4 is finance and insurance. So within finance and insurance, we're talking about anywhere that you have investments or cash, and even if it's stored somewhere around the house. So your financial data, your cash assets, your investments, your insurance policies, all of these things are going to be very important if you're here and you have an emergency. If you need to find out something about an insurance claim, then it's great to know where your policy is, what the details are, what the policy number is. But also, if something were to happen to you, then your family knows, oh, they had a bank account that I didn't know about, or wow, there's an investment account that we had no idea about. Also, maybe you have some stock certificates. I've found stock certificates before while organizing people when somebody's passed away that the spouse didn't even know about. So that type of thing can be put, everything having to do with your finance and insurance should be listed in here, including what banks, what the account numbers are, if there's anybody joint on it, credit and charge accounts, that people know what all's out there and they can monitor it. If you passed away, then they could monitor to make sure there's no fraud. Interesting thing about this section, also, I had a client, Mary, that we set up this life binder, and we did the photocopies of all of her credit cards in this section, front and back, so that way she had all of them, all the information stored instead of having to rewrite it over and over. Well, her husband became ill and was no longer using his credit cards, and they had in-home care. One of the in-home care people had stolen his credit card, and she found out late at night. I want to say that she said it was maybe 1 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning or something horrible. When she found this out, and the person went on a spending spree with his credit card, which is horrible enough in itself. So it was an American Express, and she called the police, as we're supposed to do. And the police came, and they, in order to fill out the report, needed the credit card number. Well, she didn't have the credit card because it had been stolen. And so she called American Express, and they would not give her the credit card number for the police report. They were not allowed to give the credit card number over the phone. So she was not able to fill out this police report. She was not able to get the account number from American Express. This whole process took, I don't know how long she said. It sounded like more than an hour, I think I remember. It was quite a while ago. But this whole process was in the middle of the night. She's got the police officer talking to American Express on the phone, and they still won't release the information to them, so they can't do a police report, so they can't even start to look for this person because there's no report to file. And then finally, she remembered that she had the life binder. And she ran over to the life binder, pulled up the photocopy of the credit card. There was the number. She could finish the police report finally, and they started looking for the person. They found the person. She got arrested, and everything was resolved. But without having that photocopy of the credit card, she would have just, I don't know what she would have done. She probably would have had to wait a week for American Express to mail her the card number or something like that. I have no idea. But it would not have been resolved very easily for sure, if at all. So little things like that are included in the binders that you know to make a photocopy of those credit cards, write down those card numbers. So if something were to happen, you have that information, because they don't usually show it online anymore and they won't always give it to you over the phone. So those are some of the things that go in your finance and insurances folder. Another thing, I also found some stock certificates. A lot of people hide things in books, and I've learned over the years to always shake books if we're donating them, especially if the person who owned the books is not around. And I shook a book once with a client, and out fell several stock certificates that her husband had tucked into the book and never told her about. So she would not have known that those stocks existed, and she would have donated that book with the stock certificates in it. And this way, it could be written down that they are tucked in a book, in the World Almanac. There are such and such number of stock certificates, the certificate numbers, and everything. So that way people know where to look for things. Okay, enough about that. Section 5. Section 5, I have real estate and personal property. So real estate and personal property includes not only home that you might own or land, but also storage units that you might rent and safe deposit boxes, things like that. So where are your valuables, and what property do you own? People might not know, your family might not know that you have a piece of land that you inherited and you own, but more likely they don't know that in the back of your closet is a diamond ring, and what the value is and what the purpose is. So this, you can put where your valuables are listed or hidden. You can put the appraisals. You can put an actual photocopy if you want to, or even the original if you want to, of any appraisals for any valuables. People might not know that the artwork on your wall is actually valuable. So you can put the proof that it's authentic, or where to find that proof. Just let them know where in the house there are things that are valuable, or outside of the house. If you have a storage unit, where are the keys? What's the unit number and the password to get in, and where is it at? What's in it? So that people know that there's a storage unit out there full of stuff too, and if there's anything valuable in it. Safe deposit box are the same type of thing. You can do a video tour of your house in case you need to file a claim for insurance. It's a great spot to do a video tour and just either write where that file is stored or keep it on a flash drive that we'll talk about in a minute. And then of course, the property, your real estate, all the information about properties that you own, that type of thing. So you would just go through and fill out each one, or create your own to fill out automobiles, China, all that stuff. What types of things are in your safe deposit box, that kind of thing. Section 6, legal and official records. So this includes things like who your providers are, your attorney, your estate planners, things like that, but also photocopies of the legal documents. So if you have a power of attorney or a trust or a will, where the originals are, and a photocopy of them is really good to have in here. And then this section also will help you make sure that there's nothing that you don't have that you need to have. So make sure that you know where your marriage certificate is. If you need any type of living will or something like that, then maybe that's something that it'll remind you to create one. Things like that. And then section 7 is personal and family. So this has more to do with what's important just for you and your family. So pet information. A lot of people forget to tell anybody about their pet information, like who the veterinarian is, who's agreed to take your pet. If something were to happen to you, important things that they might need to know about the pet. If something happened to you, maybe your pet has allergies or has an issue. So the basic information about your pet is great to have recorded in case something were to happen, or if you had to grab this because you have to evacuate or something like that, it's handy to have. Your memorabilia, what's important in the house, and where is it located, and why is it important? Those types of things are good to record, so that way, maybe grandma's quilt, people will know that grandma actually knitted that quilt and maybe, you know, what the story was, it was for their wedding or whatever, instead of donating the quilt, not ever knowing that it was actually a piece of history of the family. So you can write down what you have, where it's at, and why it's important. Passwords. If you have something like LastPass, the password management software, that's fantastic. You can just write the one password for LastPass, and then they can get into all of your passwords. But if you don't have that, then you can also write down the key passwords that you need. So bank passwords, anything like that, your email password, the password to your computer, things like that are really important. And also that way, if you ever forget what your password is for like your Apple ID or your computer, you have a spot that's very easy to get to retrieve that. So where things are located, things like that, this is all in that personal information section. Genealogy, that type of thing. It's just all outlined here. You just fill in the blanks, like I said. And then finally in the Spark Life binder in section 8, this is a resource section. So it comes with a cheat sheet for how long to keep your important documents. So it would tell you, you know, what the recommended amount of time is to keep your tax returns, your bank statements, your electric bills, any contracts that you have that have completed, things like that. It's just a nice long list of how long you should keep different documents. Also, I like to sometimes share additional resources. So this one does not come with the Spark Life binder, but this is one that I share sometimes with people who've purchased it, would be the disaster preparedness checklist. Now this is super handy. It's actually nice and thick. There's a lot of papers to it because it will give you some checklists and advice for all different sorts of disasters. So that way you can know if there's a threat to your clean air. What types of things should you have on hand in order to keep you and your family safe? Or what should go in a first aid kit? You know, how do you know what to put in your first aid kit? What types of things should you have for a pet or a baby or somebody elderly or disabled if you have to evacuate? How much water should you have in case of an emergency, in case of different emergencies? What your disaster plan is, that type of thing. It's all in that checklist, that disaster preparedness checklist, in different sections based on the type of issue that you might be experiencing or the general thing like tools that you should have on hand. What are really helpful tools to have in an emergency? So that is the end of the resource section. Then when I build my binder, and you can do this either with a Spark binder or your own, I mentioned that I like to put the business card holders in the back, so you can slide in some business cards and change those out as medical providers or attorneys or whoever as you change service providers. I also use a pocket like that. So that way if I have something that I want to add to the binder later and I don't have time to do it right then, I can throw it in the pocket and it's nice and safe until I get around to it. So that one's super, super helpful to have because I don't know how often, every once in a while I find something that I need to update or change within the Life binder or add to, and I don't necessarily have time right then. So I can just slide it in that pocket. It's not gonna fall out. So I do recommend putting some kind of a pocket in the front or the back of your Life binder so you can update things later when you have time. And then finally, what I like to use this little USB drive that has a hole that can go right around the clip of the binder. So that way I can keep my entire PDF version of the Spark Life binder right on here. I can also keep a copy of that video walkthrough for insurance purposes of the house and update that every once in a while. I can keep any important information or copies that I needed right on here as well. So I can just take this off and plug this in to update the typed up version of my Spark Life binder or reprint a page anytime. And I don't have to try to remember where it's at. You can also keep this in a safe deposit box. You can keep a copy here and a copy, either a safe deposit box, fireproof safe with an attorney or an advisor. You can give copies to your family, make a copy and give them to your family, and then you can have one master copy and just update the others as you need to. That I find is also really helpful. Since it's digital, you can do that. Also for me, since I do use LastPass, that password management software, I store a copy of the digital file as my backup right within LastPass in the secure notes section. Since LastPass has kind of that government grade security, and I've been with them so long and they've proven that they can be trusted by me, then that's where I keep it. Now, as far as where you keep your life binder, you do want to be very careful about where you keep it. So this is not the type of thing that I would keep on my desk that shows Spark Life Binder where just anybody could find it. The same with the digital file. I would not just post it to Dropbox because yes, they've got great security, but I'm not comfortable enough with their security to trust because all of my really important information and ID numbers, because this is my entire life. I would not trust it on something as simple as Dropbox. That's why I would use LastPass myself. You might not want to do any digital version online. That's fine. But keep the folder and the digital file very secure. And a couple of ways to do that is, for one, maybe don't put this type of a label on it. Yes, it comes with it, but you don't need to use it. Just because you print it out and you can do the cover and binding does not mean that you have to use those covers and binding. One option is you could label it something different, like geography notes. Not many people are going to want to check out geography notes, or recipes. You could label it recipes, and if somebody were to break into your house, they are probably not going to pull out a binder that's labeled recipes to look in it. They could care less. Another thing you can do, you can tuck it behind things on your bookshelf. So maybe you store it behind a layer of books that are in front, or behind the bookshelf itself, or behind the desk. If there's the space between your desk and your wall, maybe you tuck it in there. You can store it in your fireproof safe. That's a really great place if that's your only copy and you don't have a backup that's updated often. And then in a fireproof safe is really good. So that way, if there's a fire, then you won't lose the binder. There are ways for sure to make sure to protect your binder. You can also, if you do have this spine, you can always put it the other way so that there's nothing listed. And then that nobody's very interested in seeing something that has no listing. So this is really, really helpful, but you do want to keep it secure. And that's why in an emergency, I don't grab the whole binder. That would be a little cumbersome to carry if I had an emergency that I was just going to the hospital or something. I would grab this if we're evacuating for tornadoes or a hurricane or something like that. I'd probably want to grab this, or at least the USB, and keep it very safe with me in case I needed it. But the emergency binder is what I use. I actually used it personally a week ago, I think it was, when I went to the hospital myself. And the emergency binder is that quick grab version of just those super important medical and emergency info that's in here. This is the first part of that download that you get if you order the Spark Life binder. You'll find that it's already broken down into sections when you print it. Then you just hole punch it and stick it in as is. And this is kind of the first section, the only part that would not go in the main binder when you hole punch it. But within the emergency folder, you see that I have, it's kind of a whole list of things to include. And you can grab this if you're hopping into an ambulance. If you're not able to communicate, then the people that are caring for you, the ambulance drivers and medics, can then use this to find out important information about you. I'll tell you a story about that in a minute. That was a super scary one for my client. But within here, it's not very big. There's not a lot of pages, but I have one tab per person, as I mentioned. I also like to put a photo of the person in their tab. So if you don't know my moose pie, that's my husband. I call him Moose Pie. But I like to put a photo of them in the front of their tab. So that way, if they're not able to communicate, then the medical team will know, okay, that goes with this name. This is who we are talking or looking for information on. Another thing that I like to keep is current prescriptions. And the way to do that without having to constantly update it and keep a list and rewrite the list, anytime I get a prescription, usually from like Walgreens or something here locally. You can see this because I already crossed out anything important. I just take the sheet that comes with the prescription and I tuck it right into the tab. For me, I was able to find some of these folders or these tabs that had little pockets with them. If you can't find it, that's okay. You can put it in a big pocket at the back, and that's okay too. But I like to just toss it in my emergency folder. That way, when you go to the hospital and they say, or even a doctor's appointment, and they say, what prescriptions are you currently on? You can just pull out your little list and it has everything right there. It has the medication, it has the dosage, the frequency, the doctor that prescribed it. It has absolutely everything that they need to know about that prescription. And a lot of times they even give you the information about what it can, I guess, counteract, that's not the right word, interact with, medications to avoid taking at the same time. It's all right there. So whenever I throw a new one in, if I've just changed prescriptions, a lot of times I'll just eyeball it and see if there are any in there that I'm not on anymore. It's much more important to make sure the ones that you are on get in. And if you accidentally have an old one in there, it's not going to be as big of a crisis. It's just important that they know everything that you are on mostly. And then there's the emergency instructions. So here, this would include your name and address, your identification numbers, because if you go to the hospital, they're going to ask for your driver's license number and all of those things, veterans ID. If you get any veterans benefits, then at the hospital, sometimes they can also try to get some of those benefits to cover some of the costs if you have that information. Also, if you have a letter of instruction or a living will, if you have a DNR, you can put a copy of it right in here. So that way they see there's a DNR and they can actually follow that. It's a do not resuscitate. But they could follow those orders. The living will is something that would tell them how to handle if you aren't able to do daily functions, things like that, how to handle your medical care if you can't tell them. And they don't know how to do it if they don't have these documents. And if they don't have these documents, they have to do everything by the book. It doesn't matter what your preferences are. If you can't tell them, then they have to just go by what their rules are. But if it's in here, then they can actually follow what you want to have happen. So it's so important to have a copy of these things or the original in some cases, right in this emergency folder. It also has blood type. Are you an organ donor? You can write really big if you're allergic to any medications or anything like that. And then behind each person's tab, I put yet another business card holder, because then you can just slide the doctor's cards right in and they know who all of your current doctors are and all that information, and it makes it extra easy. And also, it's nice because I usually slide in a couple of extras. So if I'm at the doctor's office, then if I want them to forward my information onto my main doctor, then I can have a couple of the cards in there, and I can just give them the card or use that card to fill in their form to get that forwarded a lot easier than trying to remember. So one tab per person. Then again at the end, I keep a big pocket for anything else that I might need to add to the emergency folder or keep with it. It can just go right in the pocket. So this is a great folder that saves so much stress, so much time, gives peace of mind. I had a client once, they built the emergency folder, she built it for herself and her husband, and then a while later, her husband had a heart attack and she had to call an ambulance. He's not able to speak very well and get information across. She's panicked. The worst thing is your brain just sometimes can shut down in an emergency and you might not think of some of these important things. So she was in a panic and could not think of all these necessary things. And as the ambulance is coming, she remembered to grab the emergency binder. So she was able to hand this over to the medics. They could see all of his allergies, what prescriptions he was on, that he had a pacemaker, all of these things, who his doctor was, any preferences. And it literally saved his life, because there were some things that they would have done differently if they'd not known some of these things about him. So the fact that the emergency binder told the medics what they needed to know in order to do things a little bit differently saved his life. It's just one of those stories. It still gives me goosebumps. It just got goosebumps. But still, I love having something like this. Now here in the States, a lot of places, the medics are trained to look in or near the freezer. I don't know why they chose that, but the freezer, I guess because it's easy to find in everybody's home. They have in some areas these they look like these tubes that you used to see in the bank that got sucked up and down, and you'd put your basic information in these tubes. So for the longest time, and in a lot of areas they still do it, the medics will look in the freezer for one of those tubes for important information if they come to the house and you're not able to communicate. Well, with the emergency binder, what I do is on the refrigerator or the freezer, in a really big sign, I write that there is a binder in case of an emergency and where it's located in the kitchen. And I keep this in the kitchen. I don't keep it in super easy view, just because if I do write social security numbers or anything on it like that, I don't want it to be grabbed. But I do keep it a lot of times behind the microwave or next to the toaster where it's kind of not as noticeable, things like that. You can decide where you want to keep it, but on the freezer you can write a big sign, maybe a big red or orange sign for medics that this exists. So that way if you were not able to communicate and they had to come, then they would know where to find this to help you out. It also has people to contact. So if something were to happen, they also know who they can contact from your family and from a local contact. So set up an emergency binder for yourself and your family and make sure to keep that updated and use that, because it's literally a lifesaver. Now that is the entire Spark Life Binder. Like I mentioned, it's a digital download, so you just print it out. You can keep the digital side and type in your information. You can print it out, handwrite it. If you don't want to keep it digital, you can do both like I do. But you just print it out, hole punch it, and stick it in a binder. It's super easy. And if you want to build your own, then that's the way to do it. Now, I did want to read an email that I got from Sharon about the Spark Life Binder, because I have spent about 12 years assembling this, and I finally have everything that I can possibly think of that I've ever come across in 12 years of organizing with people that they've ever needed, and all that important information. I think I've got pretty much as much of it covered as can be. So this is something that Sharon said about when she bought her Spark Life Binder. She wrote an email that says, "Thanks, Susanna. The minute I opened the PDF for the Life Binder, I knew I made the right decision. I'm one of those people who says I'll do that on my own, but when I saw how organized and well thought out the information needed it is, I gave myself a little pat on the back. Thank you, Sharon." So that's an email that I got right after she had bought the Life Binder and she opened it. And it was, I get those all the time. People tell me all the time how much they love it, how much easier it is. And I hear also that they've meant to put together their own binder, but never got around to it. So the fact that it was already easy, assembled, or not assembled, but organized for them, all they had to do was fill in the blanks and did not have to think about what to put in each category, that they knew they wouldn't forget anything because there's a checklist, there's fill in the blanks, it's all there. They just really appreciated how much easier that it is and less stressful. I hear all the time how much the Spark Life Binder has saved somebody in an emergency and given them peace of mind and given their family peace of mind. So if you do build a binder of your own or the Spark Life Binder, let your family know where it is, or let an advisor know. If you don't want your family to know until there's a time when they need it, you can let an advisor know. And then if something were to happen, the advisor can then tell them or share the copy with them, whatever it is. There's no need for them to have it earlier if you don't want them to. If you want to get your own Spark Life Binder download, hop on over to the link either in the description or on the screen right in front of you. That link will take you to a page that will tell you even more about the Life Binder, and it will let you buy it immediately and get started today. So you'll get your download. You won't have to think about what needs to go into your binder, how to organize it. You won't have to worry about if you missed a document. And you can start to get that peace of mind right away. Not only that, but right now we have a bonus going on. The bonus for the first 50 people who get the Spark Life Binder before Sunday at midnight are going to also get free registration for the Ultimate Papers Workshop. The Ultimate Papers Workshop is the workshop that will talk all about your in-depth how-to for your filing system archives. So that to file folder, we're going to go really in depth about what to do with all of those papers, what your personality type is, including a quiz so you can figure out what's your organizing personality type, and how to set up your system for your organizing personality type. So if you're one of the 50 first people to get the Spark Life Binder before the end of the night Sunday, you will also get free registration to that workshop. It's a $25 value, and I mean, they just go hand in hand. It just makes sense. So try to be one of the first 50. Those will go pretty fast because I'm just now really starting to share the Spark Life Binder link more. And once I start to do that, I start to get a number of people registered for free for that workshop. If you only want the workshop, I will also include the link for that in the description. So you can just get the workshop if you don't want the Spark Life Binder. But if you want the Life Binder, get it now, so you might as well get the bonus with it. No, set up your binder, because these important documents, that's what stresses us out about our papers. We're worried that we can't find these things if we need them, and that's what keeps you up at night, and that's what keeps all of those papers around you, because you might need them. So this way you know you've got everything you need in one place. You can have peace of mind and just sleep well, knowing that no matter what happens, you are prepared. And it does not have to be a huge project. Like I mentioned, as you come across papers, fill it in. Don't worry about it if you've not come across it yet. It's a process. It'll all get done if you just do it one little bite at a time. So get your important documents all set aside. If you're going through your papers and sorting, feel free to create an important documents pile or a little folder in your action file to then create your binder, and keep going. Just one bite at a time, and it's going to be so wonderful when you get there. And I know that you can, because you've totally got this. You've made it this far. You're following this video. You're learning this stuff. You're taking the steps. You will get there. And I totally believe in you. Keep it up. I love you so much. Bye.